Christmas, all my Yuletide fans, from the VC Andrews Critiquer. Now that we've established which reindeer went down history more, it's time for another Top 10.
We all love Christmas, don't we? The day we celebrate our Savior's birth, experience the joys of giving, getting drunk on eggnog, and enjoying holiday classics. And you know, watching such a great classic like Rudolph actually gave me an idea. How about I look over the absolute greatest Christmas-themed works out there, ones that went down in Hollywood history and also became required viewings at Christmas. So that's right, I'm going to be doing a top 10...
Hold it right there, VC.
Well, if it isn't my old friend Murray Reactions, I see you really enjoyed my Christmas-themed cover prank video of Fly Away from Hilda. So what brings you here today?
Because it is a little takeover by me. And don't think your little joke from last time is gonna slide.
I regret nothing. Seeing your reaction was well worth how long it took me to make that video.
Because it is a little takeover by me. And don't think your little joke from last time is gonna slide.
I regret nothing. Seeing your reaction was well worth how long it took me to make that video.
Oh, you probably will by the end of this. And by the way...
What is that, pray tell?
I think you're doing countdown videos a little too lightly. You always focus on the best of a movie series or show, but never the bad. And I'm here to change that with this top 10.
Oh, come on. What's the worst you got?
You'll be sorry!
Oh, trust me, buddy. This is the worst of the holiday specials and movies available as of this recording. And I'm talking about the stuff that you won't show to your worst enemy.
Oh boy, this is gonna suck, isn't it?
Now ain't I the stinker?
Oh cool, use my own words against me. Now before we start, we are aware that the Nostalgia Critic has already done in detail reviews of a lot of what we're going to be looking at today, but considering that this is a top 10 episode list of the worst Christmas media, and half of what the NC does is shit, that was kind of inevitable. Point of fact, we're not trying to be plagiarists, we just couldn't come up with a worst holiday list without doing a few he's already done.
Yeah, and besides, we have some of our own facts and criticisms to give about these entries, but enough stalling. Time for some fun.
Thanks. So as my just desserts for confusing Christmas with April Fool's Day, I have to help Murray look over the top 10 worst holiday specials and movies of all time. Let's get this over with. Number 10. Miracle on Evergreen Terrace, The Simpsons.
So to settle you in, I'll let you start the list. Though, considering this is a Golden Age Simpsons episode, it can't be that bad.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But this episode is notorious for being probably the most hated Golden Age Simpsons episode ever made. After The Principal and the Pauper, of course.
But keep in mind, it's at the bottom of the list because The Simpsons Golden Age was a time where even their worst episodes could offer some pretty good stories as well.
True, but this one is still a pretty bad fruitcake. But anyway, 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, except for Bart Simpson, who can't wait until morning to see his Christmas presents.
But Bart accidentally sets fire to the presents, ironically with a toy fire engine. See what we mean about this episode still having some clever writing? Anyway, Bart decides to bury the evidence in the snow. Can't see that backfiring in any way. And tells the family a burglar took the presents.
But as you can imagine, Bart feels really guilty when the other residents of Springfield start giving the family free money out of sympathy for their plights, including sick and starving orphans, and suggests they use the money for something good, such as charity.
But the family decides, to hell with that, we got freaking robbed, and buys a new car, which goes through the ice very quickly. So Bart eventually can't cope with the guilt any longer and confesses everything to his family, right when the press conveniently find the burnt presents he buried in the ice.
The Simpsons try to explain, but the townspeople think the family intentionally ripped them off, turning their reputations worse than socks for Christmas. So yeah, this sounds like a very depressing episode, and it is, but what's wrong with that? The previous Simpsons Christmas episode, Marge Be Not Proud, was just as depressing, maybe even more so, and many consider that to be the best Simpsons Christmas episode ever.
Well, depressing storytelling is a lot like comedy itself. If done right in this case in a manner that's captivating or dramatic, it works like a charm.
Exactly. In that episode, Bart actually succumbs to major temptation where he wants an expensive video game so badly, he actually sinks to shoplifting it and has to learn that there are serious consequences for that, not just legally, but also how it can pulverize your reputation with the ones you love the most, which can be even more painful. That's captivating storytelling with an important lesson about honoring the law and the seventh commandment.
But here, Bart is portrayed so likably. Yes, he lied about the burglary, but he did try to convince his family not to accept the charity or to at least spend it on something good for society. And eventually, he does tell the truth to them, only for immediately to blow up in his face shortly afterwards. Which brings us to the bigger problem of the episode.
Yeah, like I said before, after explaining the situation to the citizens of Springfield, they think the Simpsons deliberately conned them, and you'd think they just explained the situation more clearly, namely how Bart was just crying wolf to cover up for him wrecking the tree, and the family didn't know about the deceit when they accepted the donation. But no, they never do because... So this really lazy and non-believable storytelling results in them becoming pariahs.
And the scenes that follow this should be funny, but for some reason, they all just seem, well, mean.
Miss Hoover? Miss Hoover?
Forget it, Lisa. I'm not teaching you anything until I get my money back. Now turn your desk around and stop learning. All the way.
Hi, liar!
Well, okay, that last part was kind of funny, but seriously, what kind of teacher says stop learning to a student? Even for a stick in the mud like Miss Hoover, that's just awful.
But don't worry, the townspeople will eventually forgive the Simpsons and...
Hey, wait a minute! They're taking our stuff! Good Lord!
Good Lord.
Now, before we wrap this one up, we just want to remind you that this is a Golden Age Simpsons episode, so naturally there is a little good in it. Like having Bart ironically burn the presents and tree with a toy fire truck is another example of the brilliant writing the show used to have.
There's also a pretty funny scene where Marge tries to earn the people's money back on Jeopardy, which doesn't go so well. They actually got Jeopardy host Alice Trebek to guest star as himself.
Aren't we forgetting something, Marge? You were down $5,200.
But Mr. Trebek...
I asked you before the game if you knew the rules, and you said you did. Judges?
Red Mom!
Well, one thing's for sure, I'm glad I'm not a Jeopardy fan.
I don't blame you, man. But anyway, in spite of the slight good, this episode is just so depressing, and not in a dramatic storytelling way, just in a really cruel and mean-spirited one. So this is one Golden Age Simpsons episode you should probably skip. Number 9. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
Next up on the list, we got a holiday B-movie that most people probably know it from a viewing at Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Released in 1964, this movie follows the Martian Emperor Kimar, who has started to realize that the children of Mars seem very unhappy and unnaturally obsessed with Earth-based television.
After consulting with a wise old guru, they learn it's because they're forcing their children to grow up too fast, and not allowing them the joys that Earth kids have with being, well, kids. Thus, they become so obsessed with Earth programming because they want that lifestyle.
So, wanting to make life better for his children, and noticing that they seem particularly interested in Santa Claus, who apparently has made his very first television interview recently, Kimar decides that there's only one solution: kidnap Santa Claus and have him bring the joy and happiness he brings every year to Earth children to the children of Mars.
So they head down to Earth to pick up Santa. By the way, it's freaking hilarious how blunt the government is with the American public about the possibility of UFOs.
They believe the object has either disintegrated in space, or it may be a spaceship from some other planet which has the ability to nullify our radar beams.
I guess the Men in Black haven't been established yet.
Anyway, the Martians get spotted by two Earth kids, whom they kidnap because they know too much, and despite the kids' best efforts to warn Santa of the kidnapping, they alas are unsuccessful.
So this movie is often considered one of the worst Christmas movies ever. So why did we put it so low on the list?
Great question. And yes, this movie is terrible. In fact, it really is one of the worst movies ever made. The Martians' costumes at best look like Comic-Con guests dressing up as the Great Gazoo. The sets of Mars and the North Pole look cheaper than the cheapest We Sing video sets. The shots of the ships flying in space are honestly on par with 1980s CGI, and the polar bear costume? I've seen Halloween costumes that look more convincing than this.
With all that said, there's just something so cheesily charming about how bad the original is. It has kind of a so bad it's good to its visuals, so we found it pretty hard to be angry with it.
Yeah, it's like the filmmakers knew they had a pea-sized budget, so they tried to make the most of it by making the visuals look especially terrible so the audience could have a good time laughing at them. And on top of that, the characters are actually pretty likable. The kids are no Millie Bobby Browns, but they do have a lot of plucky youngster charm. Santa Claus is hilarious about how chill he is with this whole situation, making jokes with the kids when they're in captivity,
Suddenly I realized it wasn't a chimney at all. It was the smokestack of the Queen Elizabeth.
And when he learns from the Martians that he's there to stay on Mars, he's pretty much like, fine by me. I will say, though, he is a bit too trusting of shady people for his own good.
We say the best characters of films are the Martians. The King of Mars, Kinmar, is pretty likable. His motives are ultimately to make his depressed children happy, and you won't even hear of anyone killing the 2 kids they've taken hostage. And his second in command, Voldar, is a pretty despicable villain as well, as he doesn't want their precious educated youth to turn stupid by fun, and is determined to see that Santa Claus and the 2 kid hostages to have an accident.
Plus, this film actually marks the very first appearance of Mrs. Claus in media, and yes, this is before the famous Rudolph special would come on television 3 weeks later. So all that into consideration, this movie definitely proves why it's so low on our top 10 worst holiday specials list.
So even though it's technically a terrible movie, it's pretty fun to laugh at how terrible it is. And on top of that, it does have a somewhat engaging characters, has a nice message to make sure your kids can enjoy being kids, which is really unique when compared to many other holiday films and specials.
Number 8. We Wish You a Turtle Christmas. Going straight to video in 1994, this was the first Christmas-themed live-action TMNT special, and we can kind of see why this never made it on live TV.
The Turtles were preparing for Christmas in the hideout, only to realize that none of them got a present for their Master Splinter, so they decided to go up to the surface to get him one. And that's it. It's literally just them going to the store and getting Master Splinter a gift, with some songs along the way. Actually, scratch that. A lot of songs.
But first, let's address the more obvious problem. It looks like shit. I don't usually use language that harsh, but I gotta speak the facts.
No kidding. Maybe as cheap store-bought Halloween costumes, these will look passable. But for an actual special, they make the third 90s TMNT movie look like Stranger Things Season 3. Yeah, you thought the hand puppet-like mouths of the turtles were bad in that movie. Just look at it in the special.
Wow, thanks, Leo. I was gonna buy one myself. Like I told you, you'd like it.
Not to mention right below are their obviously cloth necks on their otherwise obviously plastic bodies. We will say that Splinter looks, okay for a cheap direct-to-video special, but again, we're not even sure that the Turtles' costumes would be passable in a Turtles live show.
But of course, the biggest issue of the special is the story, or lack thereof. I think it goes without saying that just buying someone a Christmas present isn't a very interesting premise for the special. There's not even a spin on the premise. There's no villain that steals the presents. The Turtles aren't the enemies they have to fight on their way to the store. It's just them buying the present with all these bad TMNT parodies of classic Christmas songs everywhere.
Mustard, eggplant, and bologna. Fa la 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 la. Santa Claus will bring his reindeer. Up from the sewer into the streets to buy a gift we go. 5 video games. 4 mango cover street skateboards, 2 comic books, and a pizza with pepperoni.
We can't act like these songs are horrendous. They just feel like they were written for a Christmas-themed TMNT soundtrack or sing-along video aimed at 8-year-olds. And there are a couple of decent lines here and there.
The rap, 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 rap. Yeah, say it again, y'all. The rap, 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 rap.
I hate to admit it, but I kinda liked that pun. But the fact that the special is pretty much an opera of these cheap parodies, yeah, it really brings the whole thing down. And this last thing is just a nitpick, but did the Turtles really think about what Splinter would have wanted when they got him these gifts? I'm not a huge expert or fan of TMNT, but I don't remember Splinter ever being particularly crazy about any of these things. It really gets me when someone thinks everyone else is interested in everything they're interested in.
And topped off with the most cliched Christmas message ever, mainly the important thing about Christmas is being together as a family, this special proves to be a great reason why the Turtles should probably consider doing only Hanukkah specials here on out.
Don't give them any ideas! Number 7. The 2006 Black Christmas remake.
These next 2 entries on the list are going to be horror-themed, with the first one being a remake of a hidden cult classic.
And by the way, we're sorry if this next round seems a little half-assed, but we had to cut corners with one round to guarantee that this would be out before Christmas, and sadly this was the round we chose. But anyway, the first Black Christmas from 1974 is considered one of the earliest slasher flicks and a major trendsetter of the genre. though it didn't quite grab me enough to devote time to do an old versus new on it.
I wouldn't really bother with it, as this 2006 remake doesn't really live up to the legacy.
The setup is very similar to the original, namely how some sorority sisters start looking into a slasher named Billy Lynn's who's invaded their town during the holiday season, but there are some major differences. For one, where the original Billy was kept very vague and mysterious, never seeing much of his face or knowing much about his past, this film really fleshes him out. For one, they gave him yellow skin, and no, this is not an editing mistake, Billy has a severe case of jaundice.
His origin story is a lot grosser than the original, as he was forced upon by his own mother multiple times after witnessing her kill the father.
But Billy isn't a saint either, as he goes on to disfigure his own sister/daughter, kill his mother, then bake cookies from her flesh to snack on. And I gotta say, Billy's origin story is kind of interesting. Disturbing as hell, no doubt, but still intriguing.
Afterwards, it's a classic slasher film with tropes left and right, and it's pretty boring afterwards aside from the gore.
That's part of why we chose to give this round the short end of the stick. It didn't put in much effort for us, so we didn't put in much effort for it. Anyway, it doesn't help that this film was released on Christmas Day, which got them in hot water with several religious groups over showing a horror film during the holiday season.
Not to mention the multiple reworks and reshoots of the movie after the director Glenn Morgan and producer James Wong would have to do, courtesy of the Dimension Films executive Bob and Harvey Weinstein. And yes, this is the same Harvey Weinstein from the Me Too movement.
And on a really unfortunate note, this would be the last score ever composed by Shirley Walker, who wrote the score for Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Though blunter than the original and some great talent on board, this remake just couldn't capture the magic of the original hidden horror gem.
Number 6. Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman. Before we get into this entry, I'll let Thomas give you a TLDR on the first movie.
So basically, a serial killer gets turned into a living snowman by mysterious chemicals and goes on a rampage in a small rural town of Snowmountain, but gets thwarted by our hero, Sam Tiller. Basically, it was kind of like Frosty the Snowman meets Child's Play. So in the sequel, to recover from the stress of, well, dealing with a possessed evil snowman, Sam and wife Anne go on a second honeymoon to the Bahamas.
They have a wonderful time. That is until a team of scientists find the remains of Jack, and like most scientists in horror films, can't leave well enough alone and start testing it for life, only succeeding when a scientist spills coffee on the remains, reawakening Jack. Yeah, you think that's stupid? We're only getting started. And as you can imagine, Jack follows Sam to the Bahamas to plan his ghastly, horrible, or rather, horribly special effects laid revenge.
The first film was definitely crazy, but this one really ramps up the wackiness. Considering that Jack freezes the entire island and is able to spawn snowball minions really show it wasn't going to be taken very seriously.
And yes, it is kind of fun to laugh at how bad this movie is. But unfortunately, not nearly as much as Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, because we feel it was less intentional here. The effects here just seem like they're the straightforward limitations of the budget, rather than the filmmakers trying to be entertainingly bad with their limitations.
And on top of that, unlike that film, this movie's writing's pretty bad. Jack makes multiple ice puns worse than in Batman and Robin.
Who are you?
Winter. 20% chance of frostbite and a 100% chance of death!
They're more painful than frostbite. Oh, great. They got me doing it. Anyway, other bad writing elements include a character literally called Captain Fun, and get this. So it turns out Antifreeze can't kill Jack anymore like it did in the first movie because, yeah, they were too lazy to write an explanation. So Jack gets cut off before he can. Anyway, do you know what his new major weakness is?
Well, seeing how he is a snowman, I'm sure it's something like fire or light. Or maybe it's the power of love that warms his heart like another evil Jack Frost.
Nope. It's freaking bananas! Apparently it's due to the DNA mixing from the previous film, which has to be the lamest weakness in all of movie history.
And on top of that, the characters are written pretty badly too. The protagonist Sam keeps getting a feeling that Jack is back since they apparently share a genetic connection now, but his wife and friends won't believe him and are like, quit being such a paranoid, there's no such thing as a killer snowman. Not twice anyway. Yeah, you'd think after they barely survived a possessed evil snowman the previous year, they would at least be a little cautious and look into Sam's fears. But no, they don't believe him one bit until they frickin' see Jack return.
Speaking of Jack's mutant snow army, as I mentioned before, the first baby that hatches gives out the idea it's just a harmless snow baby who just wants the captain to be his dada. And the captain is stupid enough to believe it, with expected results. But anyway, is there anything good to remember about this film? Well, thankfully, Colonel Hickering returns from the original. Good thing, because he's probably the best character of this movie.
It's a very subtle costume you got on there, Manners.
Back in the Bureau, we would call this a reverse double negative.
So we were kind of sad to see him become Snowman Chow.
And there is one murder of Jack that I found especially despicable. So this lady is skinny dipping and swimming underwater in the pool, and while she's under, Jack freezes the water, trapping and suffocating her. I don't know, something about that just seems so, well, cold-blooded. Aw man, you got me making the ice puns now. Oh, and is it just me, or does Sam's wife look an awful lot like Joyce Byers from Stranger Things?
Like we said before, the stupidness of the effects does have a little charm, but nowhere near as much as in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. For the most part, the effects, the writing, and characters are even bigger downgrade than the critically panned first movie. We'll probably leave with cold feet after watching them. Curse you ice puns!
Number 5. 8 Crazy Nights. Okay, we know that this isn't a Christmas movie, but as my number 2 pick on the Top 10 Teacher's Pet episodes taught us, it is important to acknowledge other holidays and customs and not give all the focus to Christmas. And I guess that may have been why Sandler made this movie.
Only downside is, we think this film is the reason there hasn't been any other major Hanukkah-themed works released afterwards.
Sadly so, but let's explain why. Co-written and starring Adam Sandler, this follows a town nuisance named Davy Stone who's doing community service as a middle school basketball referee in order to avoid jail time for trashing the town of Dukesbury while dining and dashing.
The dude he's working with during his community service is a short little old basketball referee named Whitey, who is also voiced by Sandler, who tries his best to tolerate Davy, but the dude is such an unlikable turd stain, it's very difficult for him to.
But as it turns out, Davy actually used to be a very sweet and highly respected kid who was the star athlete back when he attended the same middle school he's currently refereeing for. But once his parents were killed the night he had a very successful game, Davy became the drunk Hanukkah Scrooge that he is today. Hell, his good past was the reason why Whitey had begged the judge not to send him to prison and give him a chance to do community service at his gym. He had remembered what a good person Davy used to be and was really hoping he could reawaken that good in time for the Jewish holidays. Can Davy redeem himself in time for such?
We can't deny that the animation is extremely well done. It's colorful, smooth, hell, it looks an awful lot like the same universe as the classic Iron Giant. Helps that a lot of the same production team that worked on that film, and the message is a good one. Namely, you can't hold on to your tragic past because it will make your present just as tragic. The big problem with this is, Davy is basically a Jewish Eric Cartman. Yeah, I know that sounds extremely ironic, but I'm serious.
Don't believe us? Just listen to the way he talks to an overweight kid on the team.
Foul on this kid for eating everything in sight. Huh? Jelly Jugs, next time you come on my court, you better wear a bra, okay?
He even locks Whitey, the guy who gave him the second chance, in a porta potty just for laughs, and on top of that, lets him freeze with shit all over him, only to be saved by shit-eating Reindeer.
It's not so much Sandler's performance, which is pretty good in this film. At least for Davy, Whitey, we'll talk about a bit later. But he just doesn't really have much charm to go with his assholeriness. His lines aren't that witty, has no conscience or soft spot until around the third act. It's really hard to like the dude much more than the people of Dukesbury did.
You know, come to think of it, Davy's such a scumbag that even the love interest of the story, Jennifer, has barely any chemistry with him, and even by the end, it seems like they're just good acquaintances at best. And then there's the other big issue. This movie has very little to do with Hanukkah. Hell, it's mentioned like maybe 10 times in the movie at most.
But yeah, this movie could have easily been set on Christmas and you hardly notice any difference. You know, this movie really doesn't even need any holidays. That's how little the story has to do with it.
And I guess the last thing we have to criticize is that a lot of the characters are less than appealing. Adam Sandler's voice for Whitey is annoying as hell.
Every day she does this for me. Jennifer, you're too much. My fraternal twin sister's a diabetic, and out of respect for her and her disease, I don't eat sugar products.
Rob Schneider's Asian stereotype voice is, well, very stereotypical.
He dine and dash me! He chew and screw me! He sip and skip me!
What?
He no pay for his 4 scorpion balls.
So yeah, as much as we admire this movie for trying to follow teachers' pets' advice to give a shit about the other holidays, the way they did so definitely leaves something to be desired. Number 4. The Nutcracker in 3D. 3 words. German rat people. Hey, if we said the N-word on YouTube, we'd get demonetized.
Yeah, this 2010 musical takes the classic 1892 Nutcracker ballet and cranks up the appropriateness to 11.
The film starts with 2 kids named Maria and Fritz. Oh wait, no, they're called Mary and Max here actually for some reason, who get a present from their uncle Drosselmeyer. Oh wait, no, here it's Albert Einstein, played by Nathan Lane.
It only gets stranger from there, as the gift, a nutcracker named NC, comes to life and tells the kids that he was a prince before his kingdom got taken over by the Rat King and his mother, the Rat Queen, and asks for their help to save the kingdom.
Jeez, I wonder why Einstein never mentioned his encounters with frickin' magical toys in parallel universes in his studies. And again, he also never mentioned that he actually stole his E=mc² discovery from the Warner siblings.
So yeah, if you've seen the Nostalgia Critics review of this movie already, you should probably know what the biggest problem is. It's disturbing as hell, be it Uncanny Valley, Schindler's level Nazi imagery, or just straight up imagery from hell. This Christmas movie is a traumatizing one.
And again, we love dark twisted imagery, well at least I do, but only if the content itself is captivating. And honestly, the characters are really one-dimensional here. There were definitely possibilities to create intriguing characters, like maybe we could have learned more about the Nutcracker Prince and Rat King's backstories to explain why they're such enemies, or maybe even given the Rat King a tragic history to explain why he became a whiskered Adolf Hitler. You know what? Maybe they could have had Einstein revealed to have planned this entire adventure for Mary to teach her a lesson to help her grow as a character. But no, he doesn't, because there's no character development from Mary at all in the story. So with all these one-dimensional characters, all the shock value that really doesn't have any artistic substance to it, it doesn't make for a very pleasing story. Plus, it can get really distasteful at times. Just look at the scene that's meant to be an allegory for the final solution.
Fantastico! Fantastico! Hold it!
Mooning Lisa.
So is there any good to this film? Well, unlike the critic, I actually did kind of like the songs of the film that are set to the original ballet score, but I think that's mostly because the lyrics are from music legend Tim Rice.
Every point of view is simply up to you is how your dreams come true is as you gotta hang loose and class to show. Don't need an excuse to go right go.
And I'll say it, I frickin' love the Rat King's villain song that's set to the dance of the reed flutes. Not just because it's the villain song, but because it's so damn catchy and awesome.
Darkness wept, rodents seem much clearer. Days eliminated, sunlight so overrated. Discipline created, rat-wing policies for all. So,
And we will admit, the scene where Mary is grieving for the Nutcracker, who has now become just a lifeless toy, is really emotional. And by far Ellen Flanning's best acting performance in the film.
So yeah, there is a little good in this movie, but please emphasize a little. But on the whole, it's just a disturbing and distasteful Nazi and Christmas hybrid with little artistic significance, and ultimately makes for a huge disgrace to Tchaikovsky. Sorry if I mispronounced that name, it's very hard to say. Number 3. The Christmas Tree. We're sure the fact that these kids' best friend is a tree shows just how bad things are here, and you may be wondering just how strange this is gonna get.
That's not even the half of it. This 1991 TV movie is infamous as one of the worst Christmas specials of all time, and it's not hard to see why.
Now, unlike the Nostalgia Critic, we don't actually think that this is the absolute worst Christmas special ever. Oh, it's bad, but we don't agree with him about this being the absolute worst.
No arguments there, it's still a sinker, so let's just get it over with.
Yup. In the early 1920s, a mean Miss Hannigan knockoff named Miss Mavilda runs your stereotypical orphanage of hell. The kids are abused, neglected, and poorly animated, save for when the mayor comes for inspections. Next to the last one, fortunately though, they're still animated terribly. And since it looks like she's Mother Teresa to these little ones, he gives her a fortune in donations to take care of them, which she immediately proceeds to bet most of which in poker.
The kid's only friend in town is a tree named Mrs. Hopewell, allegedly the great-granddaughter of Orchestra Mix's Pinocchio. Well, okay, never states that, but that would be no surprise at all in this film. And then, a new family was in town, and the mayor stops at their father with a job in the lumber mill and sets junior kids up for a job at, you guessed it, the Mavelda Orphanage. With the family anticipating they'll be earning enough income to buy their own place by Christmas. The orphans quickly take a liking to Judy, while Miss Mavelda takes immediately dislike to her.
Yup, and eventually decides that she's got to go. So when the kids discover this, they decide that there's only one person who can help them out, Santa Claus. So if you haven't seen the NC review of this, let's list all the problems with this stinker. 1. The animation is shit. Well, the backgrounds actually look decent, but the designs and character movements... Honestly, we've seen smoother animation in Hanna-Barbera.
And the acting? Oh boy. For the record, none of these actors ever landed or ever would land another acting job after this, and it's pretty easy to see why.
I better go now. Take good care of yourself and the children, Judy. I will be back before Christmas.
I knew we should have never shown him to your mother. Adults are always the same. I don't have to get a new one for my teddy bear. Santa, I wish somehow you could say Mrs. Hopewell.
By the way, if you're wondering whose production member's kid voices Lily like the Nostalgia Critic wondered when reviewing the film, it's actually the daughter of Judy's actress. That's right, Lily and Judy are voiced by a real-life mother and daughter. Kind of interesting. And we will say that, like a lot of bad animated movies and specials, the best performance is hands down from the villain.
Yeah, even though she's just a lame one-dimensional Miss Hannigan knockoff, Miss Malvella's actress actually does quite a lot of work in the role. You really feel the malice and bitchery in her performance.
From now on, things are gonna be different around here. You've been spoiled with that woman, but the good times are all over for you. No more Mrs. Kendall here, Mrs. Kendall there. Pack your things right now! You're fired! I don't want to see your face another minute! Get out!
And of course, there's a variety of continuity problems. Like, even though this is set in the late 1910s or early 20s, there's one shot that shows Miss Mavilda's minion watching TV. Or when Lily's allegedly dead in the finale after falling off a cliff, she shows up with the other kids when Miss Mavilda is about to chop down Miss Hopewell. And of course, even though the kids are on the North Pole to find Santa, a regular bear, not a polar bear, comes after them. To quote Doug Walker,
"Even Santa Claus Conquers the Martians got that one right!"
And of course, like the critic mentioned in his review, some moments really make the characters look awful, like the mayor only caring about if the inspector gets mad at him for allowing the children to be abused and neglected by Miss Mavilda this whole time, rather than the fact itself, and also Lily's parents only raising an eyebrow over their daughter's supposed death.
I guess we can't get mad about the general story itself because, honestly, it's pretty harmless.
Yeah, and if this was given to the right people, this might have made a much better special. Like, maybe they could have explained why Miss Hopewell is so beloved to these kids. Or maybe they could have given Miss Mavilda more depth to her character to help explain why she suddenly turns good in the end. Or, you know what? Maybe Lily should have died. Not because she's annoying, although she is, but maybe it would have been a powerful moment for the characters to grieve and also teach kids about death.
But as is, the special, while not the absolute worst holiday special in our opinion, it's definitely the third worst. And I'm sure a lot of you know, the fact that it's topped out with one of the most half-assed holiday messages in history really cements that fact.
She learned that you always win when you are good. Merry Christmas, everybody.
So tell me why I lost so badly at bowling when visiting my family for Thanksgiving.
It's because you threw the ball to the wall instead of near the pins and dropped the ball too high in the air.
Oh, take a hike, Pop. Number 2. The Star Wars Holiday Special.
The fact that the Star Wars creator George Lucas, who keep in mind made these stinkers to the franchise, want to destroy every copy of the special with a sledgehammer, really shows how bad it was.
Amen to that. So you may be wondering, why isn't this number 1?
Oh, trust us, we have something special for the top spot. But don't think for 1 second this still isn't a horrendous piece of Yuletide crap.
Taking place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo and Chewbacca are trying to get back to Chewbacca's family for Life Day, which is their version of Christmas. but get delayed by some stormtroopers. But Chewbacca's family is perfectly content with being patient, especially with this Mr. Hooper-like storekeeper played by Art Carney to keep them company, until some stormtroopers come in to search for Chewbacca because they believe the home is his hideout. And then there's some really odd filler? So you may be wondering, why is this special number 2 on the list? Its premise probably doesn't sound all that terrible.
The main problem we have with this special is it has nothing to do with Star Wars. At least 75% of it is Chewbacca's family just grunting, watching these surreal videos, which again are reasonably bizarre. But do you think this is the kind of stuff you ever expect to see in Star Wars?
Stir, whip, stir. Come on, faster all together now, cooking can be fun. Stir, whip, stir. Stir, whip, stir.
Probably not. Plus, this is all just so random and have virtually nothing to do with the main story at all.
Because of this, the main cast such as Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, R2-D2, etc. only have a couple scenes scattered here and there. Hell, we think Princess Leia only has one scene in the whole special, with most of the story being set with Chewbacca's family. And well, again, silent or unintelligible characters can often make for some of the most intriguing characters in all of media, but only if we can connect with them emotionally. As for their costumes, while they actually look decent, at least compared to most of the effects for this movie, which we'll talk about in a bit, the costumes are just too thick to express much emotion through, so it's often very hard to tell what these characters are thinking. Plus, look at their house. Would you expect Wookiees to live in a 1970s style furnished house? I doubt it.
Speaking of visuals, the effects are naturally a huge downgrade for the movies. We get that the special doesn't have their budget, but to see this in the same universe as a film series that has some of the most revolutionary special effects in all of movie history is a little disappointing.
By the way, if you're hoping for some exciting Star Wars action and battle scenes, don't hope too highly. There's virtually none in this whole special. But okay, is there anything good we have to say about it? Well, while Chewbacca's family really aren't that enjoyable, the Mr. Hooper-like shopkeeper who's visiting them is a pretty sweet and enjoyable guy. Plus, he shows that he has quite the balls the way he talks to the stormtroopers when they've raided Chewbacca's place.
Oh, I almost forgot. I want to leave you my card in case you need any, Oh, don't forget about these protective cases for your identification card. I got a good item. That's it. I'm gone.
And of course, there's the anime segments, which many consider to be the best part of the special. I'm sure in part because it introduced the famous bounty hunter Boba Fett for the first time.
And again on its own, this might have been an enjoyable, so bad it's good special, but the fact that this is a Star Wars film is a big reason why it earned its number 2 spot on this list. Say what you will about the prequels, but they at least tried to embrace the tone of Star Wars. Not always successfully, but you could feel the effort. This doesn't even try to be Star Wars at all, it's just a 90-minute SNL parody of it, and you can't do that with one of the most beloved franchises of all time. At least with the first 3 movies.
So, as complete disrespect to the greatness of the Star Wars franchise, this holiday special definitely earned the number 2 spot on our list.
And the number 1 worst holiday special is... Rhapsody Street Kids Believe in Santa Claus.
For the top spot on our list, we got a 2002 special that blows all the other films and specials out of the water.
How bad are we talking about?
Think food fight with worse animation, and you get a general idea of what we're dealing with here.
So what's the story? Well, it's Christmas vacation and this rapping kid named Ricky, who raps almost every line in the film, decides to give his teddy bear to the girl of his dreams, Nicole. And this isn't just any teddy bear, it's the bear his mother gave to him just before she died, and his most prized possession.
But as you may have guessed, Nicole, being your stereotypical spoiled rich brat, finds Ricky's present a piece of trash and throws it away.
But upon finding a letter from Ricky to Santa telling him to bring everyone, including her, a happy Christmas, she realizes that she may have been a bit of a bitch. So she recruits the help of her best friend and this other animation abomination to locate the bear. So this may not sound like a bad setup for a special. Nothing revolutionary, but with good execution, it can make a cute special. That is not what we have here.
First, let's address the biggest problem of the special, the animation. For the record, the animation software used for this movie was 3D Choreographer, a software used to create early 1990s PowerPoint presentations. even directly said not for artists. Jeez, what a brilliant software to use.
Hell, it was so limited, they couldn't even create new 3D models, just programmed in pre-designed ones. So they had to contact the software company to have custom-made models of their characters. And the production team was horrified when they saw what the company returned to them.
Even one of the senior producers, Kenny Rose, didn't know about this until premiere night of the special, as he pretty much trusted the work of the animators at Wolf Tracer Studios, and it pretty much shows in the special.
It really goes to show how much a lack of oversight by the people in charge can really hamper a project, and the worst of when an animation studio is given free reign on a project.
So because of these limitations, there's virtually no facial expressions on the characters whatsoever. The movements look worse than a baby taking its first steps, the effects and backgrounds were done in Adobe Photoshop and After Effects, and a lot of the shots are very awkward to say the least.
And on top of that, these characters are hardly any more appealing personality-wise as they are to look at, being just one-dimensional cliches of your usual Christmas special characters. Like Nicole's the stereotypical rich bitch girl, Linnea's the generic nice girl who for some reason is best friends with the spoiled mean girl, Smithy is the obnoxious but caring deep down glutton, Todd is the stereotypical bully, and for some very odd reason, Nancy Cartwright uses her Ralph Wiggum voice for him instead of her Nelson Muntz voice. It fits about as well as you'd expect.
Come on, Smithy. Didn't your mommy teach you to share?
We say the only character that's even a little charming in the special is Ricky. Yeah, his rap is a little obnoxious, but he's a very sweet kid who was willing to give up the only thing he had left of his mother for a girl he loved. And hey, it was pretty awesome of him to ask Santa to bring her a happy Christmas after how she treated him.
But other than that, the characters are just so boring. Hell, a lot of the film doesn't even focus on the main issue of getting Ricky's bear back, it's just the main characters making bad jokes, singing bad songs, or just being irritable in the weirdest of ways. By the way, you may notice how the title of this special is Rhapsody Street Kids Believe in Santa, but so far, what have you heard in the special about their belief in Santa?
No, that's pretty much in a subplot where Linnea is starting to question her belief in the Jolly Man thanks to Nicole's taunting. Again, she should probably reconsider her choice in Friends, but it barely has any focus at all. Hell, I think it's scattered throughout the special for a cost of about 5 minutes in total. Yeah, maybe they should call it something more related to the main plot, like Rhapsody Street Kids The Great Christmas Gift Out of Love, or Rhapsody Street Kids The Great Christmas Bear Hunt, or maybe Rhapsody Street Kids make the absolute worst special in history. But nope, they put it in the title, a small subplot that the story has almost nothing to do with. Kinda misleading, don't you think?
If there is one other somewhat nice thing we'd have to say, it's that the voice actors such as Paige O'Hara, Jodie Benson, Nancy Cartwright, Mark Hill, etc. do give the best voice acting performances they can for these one-dimensional CGI abominations, but not even their supreme talent can help these characters much.
Plus, it ends on probably the most awkward closing line of any Christmas special in history.
Shut that door!
Yes, they made Mark Hamill, one of the most famous voice actors of all time, say this awful and out-of-nowhere line to end the special. Granted, it would have been awful regardless of who said it, but having a legend like Mark Hamill do it is probably an even greater Christmas-themed embarrassment than any of the other entries on our list.
And if you're wondering if any celebrity could make that line work, the answer is no. No one could make that line work even if they tried. So with terrible writing, terrible characters, terrible animation software that specifically said not for artists, and the most awful closing line imaginable, all this is exactly why Murray and I consider this to be the absolute worst Christmas special that was ever made.